the Diocese of Springfield-Cape Girardeau, Missouri. The story of the faith in this region began with the devotion and resilience of Catholic immigrants, was sustained by its first bishop, and carries on today under the leadership of its current apostle, Bishop Edward M. Rice.
I'm a successor to the apostles, the 12 that were chosen by Christ. The biggest mistake that we make is taking our eyes off of Christ. So my prayer life keeps my eyes focused on Christ.
This is the story of the bishops of America, the shepherds of the past and the shepherds of today, who through their callings and ministry carry the church into the future. It's also the story of their parish, their church, the cathedral. This is The Chair, an exploration of what it means to be an apostle in America. In southern Missouri, covering an area of more than 25,000 square miles, is the Diocese of Springfield-Cape Girardeau, Missouri, a community of faith with a rich history and a deep love for their Catholic faith.
The southern third of Missouri, from the plains bordering Oklahoma to the banks of the Mississippi, is a region rich in beauty. Dotting the wilderness of the Ozarks and southern Missouri, you'll find markers of Catholic history in the area, bounded by the diocese's two sea cities of Springfield in the west and Cape Girardeau to the east.
The Catholic history in this area of Missouri consists of immigrants, pioneers, individuals or families who were escaping persecution, economic hardship, or other challenges, and they really bravely moved westward, beckoned by the prospect of jobs, land, and freedom, both religious and physical. The Catholic Church was always very mindful of the spiritual and physical well-being of these particular pioneers. So they would send priests, missionaries, women religious to assist, to organize and build communities, to build parishes, churches, schools, and essentially just help to care for the needs of the faithful in these new communities.
While the Catholic population was quite small in the early days, in the 19th century, Catholic immigrants came into the area. Now, they came looking for a better life. And Cape Girardeau experienced greater growth sooner than Springfield further west. In 1836, Vincentian fathers who had served Cape Girardeau as missionaries established the first English-speaking parish in the city, appropriately naming the church after St. Vincent de Paul.
The early records of St. Vincent's Parish in Cape Girardeau speak to a large number of converts who were brought into the Catholic Church, as well as the popularity of Catholic sermons for the Protestant audience. And those early years suggested that Catholic-Protestant relations were quite strong. But over the course of the 1850s, as a new wave of nativism swept across the country, those relations became a little bit more tense, and Catholics remained a distinct minority in the region.
German Catholics arrived in Cape Girardeau and joined St. Vincent de Paul Parish, but they really wanted a German-speaking parish of their own. They made a number of attempts to establish a German Catholic parish and construct a church, and finally they were successful with St. Mary of the Annunciation, which would later become one of the diocese's two cathedrals. As Springfield's Catholic population began to grow, Catholics petitioned St. Louis's Archbishop Peter Kenrick for a priest of their own. Archbishop Kenrick sent Francis Graham to serve as their priest. He celebrated the first Mass in Springfield in 1866 at the home of William Daly and establishes the first Catholic parish, Immaculate Conception.
The Irish potato famine of 1848 really brings an extraordinary diaspora of people seeking a better life, seeking economic stability, and end up in the Missouri area. But the Irish there are very much discriminated against and have trouble finding jobs. There's a young Catholic priest by the name of John Joseph Hogan who attempts to really try and turn things around for the Irish Catholic community. And he conceives of this wilderness venture in the mid-19th century. He's ministering to a Catholic congregation in St. Louis, and where there are over 30,000 Irish refugees, again, but discriminated against even within the Catholic community with other ethnic groups. Father Hogan's vision is almost this utopian community in what becomes known as the Irish wilderness in the Ozark Mountain area. In around 1859, Father Hogan and a group of Irish families begin to clear area in a wilderness. They assemble homes, create farmsteads, plant gardens, they build a church that the settlers all built in this forested area.
But the wilderness was not the idyllic setting imagined by Father Hogan for settlers used to city life. Father Hogan was the object of accusations and fiery sermons from local anti-Catholic preachers. The Civil War brought an end to the Irish settlement. Father Hogan's community dispersed by 1863. In 1868, Hogan was named the Bishop of St. Joseph, Missouri. And in 1880, he was named the first bishop of Kansas City, Missouri.
The Diocese of Springfield-Cape Girardeau was established in 1956 as part of a larger restructuring of the diocese in the state of Missouri. That same year, they established the Diocese of Jefferson City, as well as merging together the Diocese of St. Joseph and Kansas City. The Diocese of Springfield-Cape Girardeau covers the lower third of the state, stretching clear across from east to west along the southern tier. The diocese is predominantly rural, with the exception of two large metropolitan centers at Springfield and Cape Girardeau. And the Catholic population of the diocese has never really grown to much more than 2 to 3% of the local population.
When Springfield-Cape Girardeau was first established in 1956, Pope Pius XII named Charles Helmsing its first bishop. Bishop Helmsing was a natural choice to lead the new diocese. As an auxiliary bishop in St. Louis, he'd been assigned as the liaison to the southeastern portion of the archdiocese. From 1949 until 1956, Bishop Helmsing traveled the eastern half of the current diocese.
At the time of his appointment, the diocese had 55 parishes and 32 mission churches. And while that may seem large, they were spread across 39 counties, making it very difficult to administer the diocese. At his installation, he noted how he followed in the footsteps of the great missionaries who first brought Catholicism to southern Missouri. And he called upon the diocese to engage in a new round of evangelization. In his 8 years in office, he worked to establish several new parishes, but also to build up relations within the diocese so that members of local parishes felt part of a larger diocesan whole. As part of that effort, he encouraged Catholics to join fraternal organizations, such as the Knights of Columbus, the Daughters of Isabella, or the Legion of Mary, that would help unite them beyond their parish boundaries.
Today, the Diocese of Springfield-Cape Girardeau is a vibrant community of faith with a rich cultural diversity and a deep faith in God.
I think when people come down here, they're surprised at how diverse we are. I think we're up to maybe 14 parishes that have Hispanic Mass on a regular basis, and a good number of our parishes that over 50%, if not 80%, are Hispanic. And so we have a thriving Hispanic population, thriving Vietnamese population because of the fall of Saigon. Every year they have what is called Marian Days. In 2017, for the 100th anniversary of Fatima, they had over 100,000 Vietnamese Catholics descend on Carthage. It's an amazing experience. So we have the Vietnamese, we have Micronesians, Hispanics, African Americans. It's much more diverse than people think.
The center of liturgical prayer for the diocese is the cathedral. The Diocese of Springfield-Cape Girardeau is unique in that it has two cathedrals, St. Agnes in Springfield and St. Mary of the Annunciation Co-Cathedral in Cape Girardeau. St. Agnes was completed in 1910.
There's a beautiful simplicity about St. Agnes. The chair is directly behind the altar at the Cathedral in Springfield. And then there's this just simple altar, as if to say, it's all about the sacrifice. Above me is Christ crucified, and then below me is the altar of sacrifice. And the Blessed Sacrament has its own little chapel.
The Cathedral of St. Mary of the Annunciation was built in 1868 in the Romanesque Revival style. The three bells of St. Mary's still ring in the church's bell tower to this day and can be heard throughout Cape Girardeau.
We can see from the decoration of the interior that it's been renovated actually many times. So the first change came in the 20s when the stained glass was finished. And that's quite typical of churches, and particularly important ones, that you would begin with the construction and then the decoration would come and then the stained glass would come as money was raised and the community grew. So the stained glass is very much in keeping with the historic architecture. And then the style of the painting and decoration is really very mid-century modern. The existing interior is almost unrecognizable from the original historic interior. It's undergone many changes, some necessitated by fire and other by sort of updating and reimagining of how the architecture and the liturgy would work.
When I first came into the cathedral here, I was kind of put off. I looked up in the sanctuary and I looked at the beautiful image of the Annunciation, and I thought, well, who put that cross right in the way? As if the cross was an obstacle, you know? And I thought, well, that was just bad thought. It kind of ruins the beautiful image of the Annunciation. But then within a month after being here, I realized, oh my gosh, what a beautiful, profound thought that is, that we have to look through everything through the cross.
The bishop's chair or cathedra inside St. Agnes and St. Mary's represents Bishop Edward Rice's authority as the Apostle of Springfield-Cape Girardeau.
I am number 6 in the order of children. With an even number, I said that's the closest to being the middle child, the forgotten child, which I always say I am. And my one sister always says, there's no way on God's good earth that I was ever forgotten. My mom and dad were just simple, hardworking people. They both died young in life. My dad died when I was in high school. I was a junior in high school. And then my mom died a year after I was ordained a priest. All these years, it's just been with my siblings and I. But my mom and dad were just good, hardworking people. They were very much practicing Catholics. They believed in Catholic education. They sent us all to Catholic grade school and high school on a blue-collar salary that my dad, and until my dad got sick and passed away, my mom was a stay-home mom for the most part. I first started thinking about being a priest when I was a junior in high school. And actually, it had a lot to do with my dad's death. My dad died when I was a junior, and he died on March 19th, which later on I realized what the significance of that is, being the feast of St. Joseph. He had been sick for years, and finally the cancer got him and he was in the hospital. Hospital called my mom to say if he wanted to see him, he was going to pass away. So she went with my older sister to the hospital in the middle of the night. And March 19th of 1977 was a Saturday morning. I remember that we were all sleeping. My mom woke us up about 7 o'clock in the morning to tell us that my dad had passed away. And she wanted us to go to 8 o'clock Mass to pray for him. My mom had called the priest, and then the priest had called the sisters in the convent, and so they came with him in the middle of the night. And so when my dad passed away, there was my mom and my sister and the priest and a couple of the nuns from the convent around his bedside. And when my mom told us that, this thought just kind of popped into my mind. I wonder if I could do that. So I tell people, really it was on the day that my dad passed away when I first outwardly thought about it. I think inwardly, I think the Lord was working on my heart. I went to the seminary not knowing if I should be a priest, but I knew I had to try it. And that's what I always tell young men and young ladies who are thinking about going to the convent. It doesn't mean they're gonna make you take perpetual vows or ordain you as soon as you walk in. You've got time to figure that out. But if you're thinking about it, you should try it.
In January 1987, Bishop Rice was ordained to the priesthood in the Archdiocese of St. Louis. He celebrated his first Mass the next day at St. Cecilia Parish. Throughout his priestly life, he has served as a parish priest and pastor, a high school religion teacher, vocation director, and seminary director.
My first Mass was on the Feast of Epiphany, which is a beautiful day to celebrate a Mass anyway, but your first Mass, certainly in my home parish. It was just a great opportunity for me to kind of step back and see how good God had been to lead me to that point for ordination. My first assignment was parish. My second assignment, I taught at the high school that I went to, St. Mary's High School. I taught there for 4 years. It was a great experience. And I was at the seminary the beginning of the summer, and they were looking for a replacement. One of the Vincentians was stepping down. The head of the college program at the time was a diocesan priest, and he needed help. And he said, "Would you mind being the assistant to the college?" And I said, "Well, as long as I can still teach, you know." So that my last year is exactly what happened. I would teach during the day at the high school, and I would come back to the seminary and help run the seminary. And then the next year, I was asked to step up and be the college director. It was my Camelot. I loved it. Every one of my assignments was my Camelot. I think God has given me that grace. I adapt. It takes me about 6 months to adapt. I know that about myself.
In December 2010, Pope Benedict appointed Bishop Rice the Auxiliary Bishop of St. Louis.
So I was working at the seminary. I was no longer the director. I was the vocation director at that time. I had been out at one of the high schools, you know, you say celebrate Mass, you know, talk on vocations, and I got in the afternoon, and my secretary said, "Oh, the Archbishop called, he wants you to come over." And I remember saying to her, "Oh, what does he want?" You know, I don't have time for him, I got stuff to do. But I called his secretary, and he wants you to come over. So I went over. He told me that the Holy Father appointed me to be the auxiliary bishop of the Archdiocese. And I remember for the next hour, he and I went back and forth. I argued as to why I thought that was a bad idea. And he said, "Well, too bad, you're gonna have to do it anyway. And if you don't, you're gonna have to go to," he told me you have to go to the papal nuncio and explain why. I thought, well, I didn't have any reason not to. He actually gave me until 6 o'clock that night to make a decision. So by that point, I went to visit my parents' grave. And I kind of, you know, poured out my heart and soul. And I was expecting some big revelation or something, and I got nothing. And I just interpreted that to mean, all right, just do it. So I called up the Archbishop and said, "Okay, I'll do it." It was that simple. I remember when the Archbishop put the ring on my finger, and you know, the little prayer about being faithful to the church. That, wow. And then when he handed me the crozier, the Archbishop gave me a crozier for me to use as a gift. And it's got a history with the Archdiocese, and now I use it. It's my one that I use for confirmations when I travel. I keep it in the back of my car. And just when he handed it to me, I thought, well, I think the reality of the responsibility kind of just hit me square in the face.
In the years since becoming Bishop of Springfield-Cape Girardeau in 2016, Bishop Edward Rice has worked hard to live out his apostolic mission to govern, to teach, and to sanctify his people.
We're about 4 to 5% of the population. My goal during my tenure is to get it up to 10%. We'll see what happens. But I say, to be Catholic proud and Catholic strong. Our small parishes accomplish a lot. I've asked everyone in my parishes, and they do the most important thing that a bishop can do for his people. Before he preaches from the pulpit, before he gives any type of a conference or a talk, he himself needs to be the man of prayer that they deserve. You know, we always have to be looking to the future. We have a rich, rich history. But I've always said about looking back is if you look back for too long, you forget where you're going. And when you keep looking back, you can kind of stumble because you don't know where your feet are going. So it's good to recognize where we've come from. And we have a great history. But we need to be forward as well. I'm a successor to the apostles, the 12 that were chosen by Christ. It's all about Christ. It's very easy for the ego to get involved. The biggest mistake that we make is taking our eyes off of Christ. So my prayer life keeps my eyes focused on Christ.